All righty. We got a doozy for this one, and
Do.
I'm not sure what the controversy is specifically, but I definitely have some thoughts after having only watched this for the first time ever yesterday.
Yep. I've seen it a few times at this point.
Oh my God.
Over the
How?
years. I've watched it when it came out. I've
Mm-hmm.
watched it every now and again. I'll put it on because
Okay.
I just want to see again. I have to watch. And I think there's something alluring about good and bad movies in any way. And this is one of those that just kind of somehow it just pulls me in and says, I gotta watch it again just to see what is it that is either wrong with it
Mm-hmm.
or can I find something right with it? So,
Um,
but yeah, we're hitting a big one this time, and I think this is one that a lot of kind of that fanboy base really was excited for,
mm-hmm.
and we're really disappointed by it because we're hitting Dungeons and Dragons 2000, the 2000 version. So
Mm-hmm.
this was the first theatrical film for the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Which was bold. And everybody was really like, okay, wow, they're doing this. Because there's always been talk over the years, oh, they're going to make a movie. All we had were comics, outside of the game, the comics and the cartoon. The comics by DC, the cartoon by Marvel. Ironic,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that was it. So to see something live action was pretty exciting. Um,
If we ever get into shows, I'm gonna have to check out the cartoon because the cartoon was definitely before my time, but I always hear good things about the cartoon.
It's it's wonderful. It is a
Yeah,
wonderful show. And if you do have
yeah.
Prime or even the
Hmm.
Freevee app, there's a
Hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons channel that
Okay.
streams 24/7. It does
It
the cartoon and it does
uh,
like people playing games and other things. So it's a fascinating thing, but you'll catch the cartoon on there and just a few episodes here and there's all you need. Um, it's
right.
it's a great show.
So something I noticed when I went to go look this up to make sure I was watching the right one,
Mhm.
there are a total of four Dungeons and Dragons movies.
Yes.
So this one was like the first, like you said. Then there
Yes.
was two sequels that ran,
Yes.
I think, as late as 2016.
Yeah,
Maybe.
they were like straight to video or DVD or whatever at the time.
Yeah,
And
but
I
they're
think
listed
actually the
as
third
like
one I think was
two and three.
sci-fi, I think.
Might have been.
Um, but yeah, they did manage to squeak out three.
Hmm.
I've not seen two or three. I've only ever seen this one. So I can't speak on their
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah. I can't imagine their man, I don't. You know what? Before I even go down that road, controversy.
Mm.
What makes this controversial? I mean,
Well,
is it just strictly from the point of good, bad, or were there actually any like controversies tied to this?
I think the controversy is really like not anything with the movie itself or with the people.
Hmm.
It's really just the fans were not pleased with how they handled the lore and the mythology of Dungeons and Dragons. So
Hmm.
apparently there's a lot of things in here that are not correct based on, the source books and things that have been published over the years. So that really turned a lot of fans off so that they kind of just were like, no, I'm not buying this. So that's really the big thing is it really was, fans were excited because they're finally getting their Dungeons and Dragons movie, but then they got this and they're like, this is it. This is what you're giving us
Yeah.
is this movie. This
No, I
was
mean,
still a year away before we had Lord of the Rings. So
hmm.
even at this point, there really wasn't a good fantasy franchise. Most
Hmm.
of them didn't really get very far. A lot of them
Hmm.
would get through one, maybe two movies. And if, I don't know, there really wasn't a viable market in theaters for that sort of thing until Lord of the
I
Rings really
think I
changed.
think before then, I think the biggest thing was they could get away with one movie, but because they were doing it for the story and they weren't trying to build franchises the
Mhm.
way, they've kind of gotten to now, like, hey,
Right.
how many movies can we squeeze out of an IP versus like, I mean, there were great fantasy movies up till then. You know, you had Willow,
Mhm.
you
Oh
had
yeah,
Labyrinth, Dark
sure.
Crystal, and
Willow.
tons.
I mean, yeah, there's great movies, but none of them
Mhm.
were huge box office successes. They all
No.
kind of did okay, but they
Hmm.
weren't like they weren't Lord of the Rings. I mean, just
No, no.
that's really the turning point that made fantasy
Hmm.
marketable because everybody's like, oh, this is great, you know, and it made billions of dollars. So yeah, this is, but
Hmm.
none of these movies ever really kind of scratched that. They always were just they had their fans and but they
Hmm.
never really exploded, I guess, with success.
Right.
Um, but this, I think, from my understanding, so a lot of the ways in which they handled the dragons, the ways in which they handled the archetype characters wasn't quite correct.
Hmm.
So from my understanding, like the way that the mythos would explain like the thieves or whatever, and they did use the term, you know, honor among thieves. That's always a big thing, a big theme, which obviously was the subtitle of the
The
most
most
current movie.
recent iteration, yeah.
Yeah, so it's you know there was always that idea, and interestingly enough, the main characters in this movie were thieves, as were the ones in you know the current one. So they kind of
At
still
least
took that same angle.
at
Uh,
least two of them. I think several of the other characters that I noticed, like in the group, were sort of
mhm.
just um, kind of brought together by circumstance.
Yes,
Because like one of them was like a librarian mage, the other was like a
yes,
drunk troll. I don't think
yes.
either of them had thief motivations, but
No.
you know, just based on what was going on and everything, they kind of banded together as needed. Um,
Then the elf, the warrior elf
yeah, the one that like
character
Marlon
who,
Wayans hits on the bar at the bar.
yeah,
Um,
I think Marlon Wayans brought a lot of head scratching as being cast as that character. Not that he was, you know, any
mhm,
worse or better than anybody else. I mean, I don't think he was bad. I just think
mhm.
no one expected that because he's known for comedies. So
He
it's
was
kind of a
actually one
different
of the
turn.
I wrote a review for that movie last night, having never seen it before, and he was one of the only kind of two good things that I found in the film.
Mhm.
Um, because I mean, like for the time, he was, you know, still kind of, you know, he's pretty relevant. So, you know,
Yep.
to get a name like him, you know, might maybe have appealed to a demographic that wasn't necessarily the D&D demographic, but like, hey,
Right.
we're putting this in the theaters. We want bodies. We don't necessarily care if they're the bodies that want to see this. So let's get people that they recognize in
Yeah,
the vein.
that would probably attract that audience, the
Mhm.
audience that's familiar with him.
Mhm. Same with like
Definitely a
Jeremy
younger,
Irons.
hipper audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jeremy Irons is another interesting choice. I mean, a great actor. He's obviously
Hmm.
done some wonderful things, but
Hmm.
definitely chewing scenery left and right. I mean, that guy was I'm sure he knew, and I'm pretty sure I've heard him speak like he's never watched the movie since he made it. He
Oh
just said,
God.
I got paid.
Mm. Hmm.
Which can you blame him? You know,
Um,
he got paid.
no,
What can you say?
no. Now, have you actually played Dungeons and Dragons?
Um, no, I've never really played the game, like the
Okay.
tabletop game. Like I've never sat and played a campaign. I know many
Hmm.
people that do. I think my brother does.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've never got to play it.
Hmm.
So I don't know
What?
how deep and
Yeah.
involved it can be.
I play, and I actually didn't start playing until like COVID. That like you know everybody had their different like COVID things, and that was one of my COVID things that I got into. And that's actually what I do on Sundays. And so
Hmm,
that's where I came from before we
okay.
got onto this. It was very, very like D&D centric over the past 24 hours between watching the movie and
Mhm,
this. And it's a doozy.
mhm.
You know, a lot of the movie as I sat there, I kind of thought to myself, I felt like I was watching like an extra long episode of like Xena or Hercules. Like it had those kind of camera shots,
Yeah,
camera
yeah,
angles,
yeah.
and the
Very
funniest
TV.
part, yeah, the funniest part though is I almost think those TV shows had better CGI when they used it than this movie. Like the
Yeah, I
dragons
think
and
yeah.
some of the stuff
The
was just
dragons looked
really
really rough in here.
jarring. Oof.
Yeah. Um, you know, here's the actual quote from Jeremy Irons. I was just looking
Oh,
that
okay.
up. Because
Hmm.
he was asked why he did this film, and he replied, "Are you kidding? I just bought a castle. I had to pay for it somehow."
Yes, I do remember reading that somewhere.
So, he knew. I mean, it's a paycheck, and that's totally understandable. But he's a name, and he was a big name to get. The
Yeah.
guy that directed the film, Courtney Solomon, it was his first feature film to direct. He had
Oh
bought
boy.
the rights in 1990. So
Okay.
that's why we had always heard rumblings, oh, there's a movie coming. So it took him 10 years to get to raise the money to do this movie.
Hmm.
And that's what you get. You got.
And when I looked earlier, is from what I last saw, that it lost money. It did not make its budget.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm pretty
It was
sure.
off. It was off by like 10 million, which I mean, that's maybe one of the head scratchers for me. Like, in this day and age, if you fail, you don't usually get a sequel or a third, even if they're
No.
direct to video or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
somebody
Oh,
somewhere
sure.
doesn't have the confidence to want to put money behind something if it didn't
Hmm.
pass the first time. And how they got to a second and a third knowing that they first one lost money is just like
Yeah.
mind-boggling. I mean, it's years before Kickstarter or any of
Hmm.
these like crowdfunding
Hmm.
platforms. You
Sure.
would beat the pavement to find somebody to fund you, and it happened twice more.
Yeah, right. Amazingly enough.
Hmm.
Apparently, the Courtney Solomon had a list of directors that
Hmm.
he kept pushing towards the TSR head, the guy that the
Hmm.
people that ran Dungeons and Dragon. And one of
Hmm.
them, they vetoed every one of them. They're like, no, no, no. And one of them was Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh my
Or
God.
yeah, interestingly enough, I don't know if he was approached and he said, "Yeah, I'll do it," and they said no, or if it was just like, "Hey, how about him?" And they were
And they
just like,
vetoed
"No."
him before he was even approached.
Right. That I'm wondering if that were more the case, but
I
still, just
don't
that name.
think I don't think Francis came to the table and asked. I think if anything, they floated the name and they if I had to be a fly in that room, I bet they thought to themselves, okay, he's a great name, but he's probably going to be expensive.
He,
Pass.
yep, yep, most likely.
Hmm.
But I thought they had a lot of interesting casting choices in here, like Richard O'Brien
Hmm.
from Rocky Horror Picture Show fame,
Hmm.
playing one of what was he, the Thief's Den or whatever that was.
Yep.
And you also had Tom Baker, one of the most
Hmm.
infamous Doctor Who actors. He played the Elf King or whatever there, which
Hmm.
I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so they had, there was some. It was nice to see some of those other faces in there, but unfortunately, I wish they had a little more screen time and a little more because
Yeah.
I think the way they kind of elevated the scenes they were in, and
Hmm.
maybe it would have helped the movie a little more. But I guess it wasn't enough screen time to really give the movie that, you know,
I think
what it
I
needed.
think at this point, like I mean, and I've only seen this one in the Honor Among Thieves. For curiosity's sake, I might have to check out two and three at some point, just to know how those did. But I think there's a glaring like um sort of idea for a Dungeons and Dragons movie that maybe just seems too simple to them, and they don't like nobody's approached it this way yet.
Mhm.
But except for Stranger Things, which when they
Hmm.
did it, everybody lost their mind and we're like, oh
Hmm.
wow! Like in my line of work, I've had people come in to get into D&D, and usually the preface was, oh yeah, I saw it on Stranger Things, and I was like, oh, of
Yeah.
course you did.
Yeah. Interesting.
But
Yeah. That brought it out.
but I think that the idea behind a movie where you actually show a campaign, you show the people get together for their session, and that's sort of the bookend for the film, and then kind of go into the, campaign, like you show the avatars, almost like in the vein of the newer Jumanjis. You
Hmm.
show the people in the real world, but
Hmm.
then you cut to show them like how they would look in the game. It's role playing,
Hmm.
so they would look different than you see them sitting around the table, but you
Hmm.
use the idea of the actual game as the
Hmm.
frame for the movie, and none of
Right.
them have done that.
You're right. They've always kind of tried to make it like it's its own world and it
Hmm.
exists on its own. Whereas
Hmm.
it is something that's created by the players, and
Hmm.
maybe that's something that it needs to be.
I mean, I think that would
Maybe that
resonate
would
with
have helped
people.
this movie because maybe something like that, bookending it like that,
Hmm.
maybe the ridiculous of some of it would have been like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
That
because
that could.
because until they do that, we're just supposed to take it at face value that this is how that world is. And I mean, man, some of those scenes with Marlon Wayans, like you said, that the choice to cast him is kind of funny, but
Mhm.
it's definitely not like what a D&D player would expect out of,
Mhm.
a character in the game.
And I
So,
think maybe that made it feel like it wasn't being taken seriously.
right.
And that might have turned, that's another thing that might have given people the bad
Yeah.
taste
Oh,
in it.
whoa. Marlon Wayans in D&D. Yeah. Ha ha
Yeah,
ha. Nice
right,
try.
right. He was shooting Requiem for a Dream at the same time as this,
Oh,
which
wow.
was a huge, critical success of a movie.
Hmm. Sure.
Um, but it's kind of funny that that one is such a more respected picture, and this one kind of is the one
Sure. I
that
mean,
probably
this
stands out
this
as that.
this almost feels like a precursor to like scary movies, which
Hmm.
him and his brother were working on
Hmm.
and were coming out around this time, like 99,
Hmm.
2000, 2002.
Yep. Yep.
So like it was like, oh, okay, so ha ha ha, he's your atypical funny man parody guy.
Mhm.
Cool.
Right.
I would believe that 100% if that's what the role called for when they hired him.
Yeah.
So,
You know, here's something that kind of, even when I first saw this, always kind of
mhm.
screamed it. I always
Yeah.
feel like like, I don't know how the script was before the shooting script was finally, approved and it was moved into production. But I feel
Mhm.
like they took a lot of influence from episode one, Star Wars episode one. The young Empress, all of these sorts of things kind of, because that was a year before this came out. And, I'm wondering if that kind of said, oh, we need some of those. That movie was successful.
Mhm.
Let's try some of that.
Mhm.
It felt that way. Like I felt like the Empress character really didn't bring much to the film. She was just kind of there because we needed a,
They
a
definitely pulled from a very traditional, like, heroic framework of like, here's the bad guy second in command, here's the
yeah,
hero, I mean, she was definitely not like a damsel by any means. They
no,
had her wanting to be like a
sure,
sort of an active queen, but you really just didn't have a whole lot of info. It was just like
no,
I'm the queen, but I'm young, so the old seasoned mage wants to take over because he thinks he knows better.
yeah. Yeah,
And
and I
and it
felt
was
like,
very
we
much
didn't get
like
enough
that.
of her backstory. Like I felt like she was a character that really needed to be established because she's really pulling out all this stuff at the end when she's
Yeah, oh
trying to
yeah.
control the
And you're
dragons
kind of
and
like, who are you and why
right.
yeah, why are you doing this?
How does she have this ability? Is that how she
Mhm.
became emperor? These are questions you have, and
Yeah.
you're like, they would have been
It
nice to have been answered.
it definitely didn't help Thora Birch's career. I will say that.
This was right after, probably a year after American Beauty, which
But
was,
not and maybe probably a year or two before like Ghost World.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was sort of the in between. Yeah, it didn't do
Yeah.
any favors for her career at
Mm-mm.
that moment. Thankfully it didn't
Uh-uh.
destroy it for her, but
No, but I mean, like, she went on to Ghost World, and then Scarlett
mm,
Johansson, like, B
blew up.
character, and that yeah, she blew up. And,
Yeah.
if you asked me the last Thora Birch movie I'd seen, I'd be hard pressed to think of something.
Outside of Ghost World, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
After that, it's like, I'm not
20,
sure.
22 years ago now, maybe.
Mhm. I mean, she had a
So,
great career in the 90s because she was in,
sure.
Kindergarten Cop. She was in the Harrison Ford, Jack Ryan movies,
Hmm.
American Beauty, like a lot of big stuff at that point. And so at
Hmm.
this point, her career was really peaking.
Yeah.
I think then it just sort of fell off a cliff, I guess.
She was one of those actresses that had a hard time transitioning from like childhood actress
Yeah.
to adult. I mean, even though she had a couple adult roles,
Yeah.
you know, if you make it, you keep going, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah. Well, I know her from what I understand, her parents were both adult film actors. So
Oh,
she
okay.
came from that kind of background. I don't know
Hmm.
if that maybe, I'm not saying that that's why, her career, but I mean, it may be sort of,
Hmm.
influence. the, that it didn't go much further than that. I don't know. But
Potentially. Yeah. Um, trying to think though if there's
now,
any.
Bruce Payne, who
Mhm.
was the second in command, Damodar, I believe was his character's name.
Yeah, he was the guy with like the blue
Blue,
lipstick, the whole
which
movie.
is
Yeah.
such a strange, it was a strange makeup choice for
Hmm.
that character. I felt like that, like he's an imposing looking character, but the
Hmm.
blue lips made me say, is he dead? Is this like, what is this? Like, why is he
He's
blue?
some kind of creature, something
Right. Because he didn't seem to be anything more than a human.
that
I
we
mean,
know of.
I don't know.
But
Yeah.
they didn't,
And I
even
think
when they
that's another
showed,
thing.
yeah, even when they showed very clearly
Like,
not human
plain.
things, we didn't get any extra details. It was just you see him and you figure it out.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, I thought his, Jeremy Irons putting the creature in his
Oh my
head,
God, in his head, yeah.
yeah, was pretty, it was, some pretty interesting effects, to say the least. Um,
Yeah.
he,
That
he
was, yeah.
he was really doing his best to sell it, though.
Hmm.
The torture of the pain in his head. I mean, I'll give him props because he's done a lot of movies and usually plays a villain in a lot of them, and it is always convincing. But definitely,
Hmm.
I think with what they had to work with, they were doing the best they could.
I
Um,
remember there was a scene and I just was like, it was such a atypical like hero villain scene. It was like, give me the thing and I'll let them live. I promise. And he's like,
mhm.
you promise? Yeah.
Yep,
And he gives him the thing
yep,
and he
yep.
doesn't let them go. And he's like, but you promised. I lied. And I'm like, oh
I
my
lied.
God. I'm like, what movies did you guys watch that like, what
Yeah,
you set this up based on?
I know. That was so very just bad.
Mm.
Bad moments.
Now,
Um,
I'm hoping that anybody watching this has seen the movie because I do have like thoughts and confusion that maybe you having seen it multiple times may be able to give me some insight on the ending.
mhm.
So the ending for anybody that hasn't seen this, this is your spoiler tag moment here. If you don't
Spoiler
want
alert,
to hear
right?
it, skip past that. Um, they all kind of gather at the grave of Snails, who was played by
Nails,
Marlon Wayans, who doesn't make it all the way to the end.
correct.
And
Has a
they,
pretty grisly
yeah,
moment when
yeah,
it really shifted tone in the film
it
when
did, and it,
his
it made you
character
go
was
like, wow, this guy who's very like oh I don't know, kind of silly is
upbeat. Yeah,
yeah
he was the
um
comic relief.
yeah had such a grisly way to go and didn't make it to
Mm.
the end. But
It really shifted. I think the tone went in a really it was bad. It was a bad direction
Mhm,
to go because I
mhm.
mean everything was so lighthearted. Even when they're in danger, it was still kind of lighthearted. But at that moment, it was like no, it is completely different. But but go on. I know you're gonna talk about the
No,
end or
no. So,
grave
well,
of
yeah.
Stan.
So they get to that though. They're going to kind of honor him like at his grave, which is like a tower of stones with like his name
Yep,
painted on a stone at the top. And we're like, okay,
yep.
this is kind of cool to see like how you would demarcate a death in this. But like something happens, and
Mm-hmm,
the main character gets told, hey, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, and like
hmm
the stone with the name on it kind of like
hmm
disappears, and then like all the people around it turn into like light orbs,
hmm
and then we hit the credits. And I'm
Yeah,
like, um,
right.
did I miss something?
If we all did
Okay, because
it,
I rewound that like twice, and I was
yeah,
like, I don't
and
think
not
there was nothing like leading up to this point that
right.
led me to believe what this is supposed to mean.
Yeah, I'm like, is he coming back to life? Are they crossing to the plane where he is? I mean,
Right,
I'm
right.
not
Who
sure what
knows?
they were alluding to at that point. I
Right.
guess we would have had to have waiting for an actual sequel with those characters, but I know that the sequel they made was not. Uh,
Didn't like carry on with them.
it carried on with Damodar.
Okay, so
Oddly
the main
enough,
guy.
the villain, yeah, the villain who. is thrown over the side of the spire
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
Returns. I don't know how, but he's in that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what the point of that was trying to say. Oh, is he coming back from the dead, or are they going
Or are we all just sacrificing ourselves and going to wherever he is?
right? I don't. I'm not sure what that was. That was about.
All right, so it's not just me. All right, just
No,
making sure.
yeah, and I think most people would probably want to know the reason. There actually was an alternate ending. I was just looking at
Oh.
it. So this is where Empress Savina, she destroys her rod and proclaims the heroes champions of the throne. Uh,
Hmm.
so they would have been, I guess the leading.
Yeah, well, they say that sort of at the thing because he's like when he goes to visit Snail's grave, he's I'm gonna be late for my own knighting ceremony, which I'm already like, oh, okay, so you get knighted in this world, okay,
Hmm. Right,
and then
yeah.
all the light
Interesting.
stuff happens and we never get to the ceremony.
Hmm. Which, yeah, I would have rather seen that ending, like more of a
Star
happy
Wars.
sort of, yeah, the medal ceremony in Star Wars type of thing. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'd
I mean,
want that.
if you're gonna copy other stuff at this point, like with like everything else, just go for it.
Yeah, right. Why stop there? Just
Hmm.
everything else seemed to be this, right up to that point. Yeah,
Hmm.
it was yeah, I'm not sure exactly what their plan would have been for a second film if they
Hmm.
had continued with that. Um I will have to say, like, all right, so Justin Whalen, who played the main character,
Hmm.
um the only thing I was familiar with his work with was Lois and Clark, The New Adventures
Hmm.
of Superman. He played Jimmy Olsen in
Hmm.
seasons 2 through 4. So when he was cast as the lead, it wasn't off-putting as much, but once I saw him there, I didn't feel like he had the
The chops.
the charisma to carry that movie. And I think that was a
Yeah.
big downfall of it, was he just didn't have what it needed to help make that
Hmm.
more. Because I mean, and I think Jeremy Irons is doing the best he can by just really,
Hmm.
putting as much of that scenery chewing as he could in that. And that
Yeah.
he had that up here. He's really like, I'm the bad guy. And the good guys just couldn't bring themselves
Right.
up
No,
to
I mean,
that
like even
level.
his final fight with Jeremy Irons, like he
Mhm.
kept like swinging the sword at him, and like he gets kind of dejected because he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I really can't beat you. And
Yep.
then I think he kind of got like saved by Savina,
Mhm.
and with the destroying of the rod and all that stuff. And he's like,
Mhm.
you don't know what you've done.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm
I
like,
can't even jog.
what you're really telling me is the quote unquote champion of the realm didn't even need to be there. Like
Mhm.
ultimately, like he didn't do a whole lot to actually defeat him.
No.
Maybe he distracted him long enough for Savina to make her move.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. You're
Oh.
right. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, just even another Star Wars ripoff where the sword battles. I
He didn't
mean,
even have the like rage that should come from his friend like being
oh
killed like
yeah.
in pursuit of that. Like that would have been cool. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm really mad that you did this. I'm gonna try to take you out. And it was more like, ah,
Yeah.
no, okay.
I mean, he had the
Thanks,
battle with
Jimmy.
Damodar.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Him and Damodar going at it. And that
yeah,
was, okay,
that was
that was
good. That was
fine. But
better
yeah,
than the final fight.
yeah,
Hmm.
yep. But he should have had more of that when he carried it to Jeremy Irons, because this is the guy that pretty much ordered this other guy to do all this stuff. He's more of a reason that your friend's dead. Like,
Damodar's got a thing in his head too. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
he's he's motivated in his own way.
Yeah, he needs to get that out. So he's going to do what
Hmm.
he can to get there. And it's all
Hmm.
because, Jeremy Irons' mage there is pushing him to that.
Hmm.
So yeah, he should have had a lot more of that anger and that rage at that moment. Really saw that battle. Like, it should have been to a point where he was almost on the thread of, death, right there at the point where he's got to pull himself out before, to defeat Jeremy Irons. So it should have been much more, you know,
Energetic.
yeah, or at least we should have felt more like he was in peril, more danger. It didn't feel like he was really in any major
No,
sense of danger at that point. I
I
don't
also
feel
was a little bit. I was a little bit surprised at one point too, with there's a little bit of like banter going on at the end,
Hmm.
and Jeremy Irons is like talking to him about, just kind of like, I don't know, he was kind of like having a conversation where he's like sizing him up mid-fight,
Yep.
and I just like thought to myself, I'm like, did Jeremy Irons even know this guy existed at all during the movie?
I don't, not until that moment, I wouldn't think, because he
Right,
really,
but like he definitely like speeched at him like a villain who knows whose
Mhm.
enemy is. And
Yeah,
I was like, I don't even really think like really how this should have played out was like, who are you? Do I even
right.
know you?
Yeah,
And
that
and
would
that
have been
that would have
more,
been
I
kind of
think that would have been
funny.
better because that
Yeah.
would have been like, I'm basically saying, you're nothing. Who do you think you are? I'm this
Hmm.
powerful
Hmm.
mage. You're nothing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that would have maybe made that battle even more because now he's got to prove himself
Yeah.
to defeat him. And that's what it needed. It needed some sort of boost to give it more, you know,
Hmm.
more levity or something in that battle. But I
Hmm.
mean, those sword fights were direct ripoffs of Star Wars. I mean,
Oh
every
yeah.
time the sword clashes, they're
Hmm.
flashing with magic and lightning or whatever, and I'm like, we didn't hide that ripoff at all. Kept
Hmm.
that going. But I think that was a way in which they were trying to really make those battles more exciting too. It's like, hey, the swords, look at the clashing and the excitement. Because I think the choreography wasn't anything amazing, and they probably
No,
didn't
no.
have
I
the
mean,
budget to
it
really
was
get the
very
good.
basic, and there weren't
Yeah,
like that many scenes where it like had a chance to be shown off.
right.
There was some like very basic fight scenes.
Hmm. I think and I think in those
Hmm.
situations too, we want to know that these characters can handle themselves in a fight. The only one I felt maybe could have, but they didn't give him enough screen time was the
The
troll
troll.
or the
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say the troll.
because he was the gruffer guy and he's like, he looked like he would have
Hmm.
been the guy that could have handled himself in a fight, but they didn't give him enough to do.
Hmm.
He was just there just because we needed another, you know,
Yeah, just to make it seem like it
D&D
was a
character.
like an appropriate like smattering of archetypes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, because without him, yeah, we didn't have enough. Same with
Hmm.
even with the elf warrior there. She seemed they made her tough. She played the part, as well, but I feel like even her battles weren't as impressive as they could have been. I would like to have seen more because like when she escaped that part where he
Hmm.
hands over the thing and he's like, I lied, that whole scene, and she escapes from her captors, it seems so like, was there even any effort there? They weren't even holding her or something. It just didn't seem like there was much of a fight. She just like turns around and stabs him in the back. And I'm like, where'd you get those things? They didn't take those off.
Hmm.
But there's like little things like that where you're just like, this should have been more, I don't know. I felt like there wasn't enough danger for the characters. And even with the villains being, what they are, I didn't feel they were really um as menacing or as oppressive or something as they could have been towards them. I
Right.
mean, Damodar, sure, he was tough and his battles were pretty good, but the guards and other characters that they had around him really weren't, there wasn't much
Nope.
there.
They
You
were
know,
they were typical henchmen.
yeah, it didn't feel like they had like they were just there just collecting their paycheck and
Hmm.
going at the end of the day. Yeah, I would say though, on a good side. Now, looking at the positives of this movie, which maybe there aren't many, production value was decent. Like the sets looked good. I thought, like the interiors of the castles, like in the beginning when Jeremy Irons' character is, trying to get that staff or something to work, and the dragon dies in the blood. That whole scene, I thought that the interior of that was really good. Like all of the sets in there were really neat. They had the little thing that spun that opened up the portal or made the thing there, whatever the staff. That was
Yeah.
cool. I liked the scene in the treasure room where the skeleton talked. The skeleton moved really well. I thought for
Hmm.
a practical effect was really a
Yeah.
nice effect. It just really moved well. It didn't look like a puppet. It didn't look like bad CGI. It looked like a really good.
Right.
Uh, um,
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. That was one of the like rare pieces in the film where you were like, oh, okay, this isn't going to be like a A weird jarring dragon. Got it.
Right, yeah, dragons, which probably were the big sell of that movie, were because that's what I wanted to see, were really cool
Mm.
dragons.
Yeah.
Really not good dragons.
Mm-mm.
They looked really, really bad CGI. Like they had blown their budget up to that point. Like we still need dragons,
Yeah.
so to whip those out as
Well,
best we can.
I think the one of the big things in D&D too, which might not be common knowledge, but depending on the color of the dragon, they have sort of like different things that they do, different sort
Yes,
of
that I am familiar with.
alignments. Some colors are specifically evil
Mhm.
or some are good. And so the only thing they kind of spotlighted was like, hey, this rod will control red dragons, but they really don't go into what any of the colors really signify for the dragons. They're just
Right.
like, here's the red dragons which you control, and here are all the other dragons that aren't the ones you can control. Okay.
Right. Are we supposed to believe one is a good dragon or bad? I think those things weren't
Yeah.
really clear either, you know. I
It,
mean, other
it, it
than
wasn't. So.
and that for something that was supposed to be such a huge spectacle at the end. I mean, this is the climax. This is a big battle.
Hmm.
All these dragons in the sky
Hmm.
and it just it looked so honky tonk for, you know, that
Oh,
for
that's a good one.
it just didn't look as convincing. I mean, I think back on, Dragonheart,
Oh
even
yeah.
with
Yeah.
Willow or Dragon Slayer from 1981. That
Sure.
dragon incredible in that film.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's a practical effect, but in this one they just I don't know, you had maybe the CGI was not the way to go for the close-ups and things, and
Hmm.
it definitely detracted from that. It takes you right out of the movie at that point because you're like,
It
it
very
just
much
looks
did
weird.
several times.
It looks weird. And when you get to the end where Jeremy Irons is finally like, you know,
Yeah.
gobbled up, if you will, it's just like, that's it.
That's
Okay.
it.
Okay.
All you had to do is take away his staff, and now all the
Yep.
dragons are like, "Oh, hey, we're gonna go get the guy
Oh,
that's been
this is the
controlling
dude
us."
that was the douche. We'll eat him.
Mhm. Yep,
Yeah. Yeah, it seemed like that was it. I should have done that. We should have just smashed this thing when we got it, when we
pretty
found it.
much. Yeah.
It seemed like, it missed that. But, again, just going back to some of those highlights, the good parts. I mean, it's always a joy to see someone like Jeremy Irons just going crazy.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
taking the bad material and just making it so much crazier than it really is. I thought that was always fun to watch him on
Yeah,
screen.
he was definitely one of my like, pros for the film as well. Like I really can't think of roles I've seen him in that I didn't like.
Right.
So, even
Yep.
in it's one of those things like even in a not great movie,
Mhm.
he's still a good part of the not great
Yes.
movie.
Yep. I mean, he knows how to bring it, and he
Hmm.
brought it because he
Yep.
knew this. This is crap material, but I'm gonna do
Hmm.
my best to make it
I'm gonna do the best I can
work.
to pay for my castle.
100%, 100%, and he did.
Hmm.
He brought his A game as much as he could. Yeah,
Hmm.
I felt like I felt the young cast was not mature enough to play the roles they played.
Hmm.
I think most of them needed more. I don't know, something
Time.
behind them more because like I felt like they, as much as they really wanted to be these characters, they just weren't. There's a movie. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Valerian and the City of
This
a Thousand Planets. Um, it's the same. I had the same issue in that film
okay.
where the actors are the right age for the characters, but
Yeah.
the actors playing them are not mature enough to play the role
The
they're
part.
playing.
Right.
And I feel like that is what's wrong with this one, is these
Hmm.
they're just not quite like Justin, like I said, Justin Whalen, I knew him as the one thing. So he didn't have that level of there. Thora Birch, she's done some great stuff, but I don't feel like she's never played that part where she's that strong leader. So I felt like she didn't really kind of have enough guidance from the director or something that just would have given
I
it
was
to
gonna
her.
say
Plus the
I'd
material
say
wasn't the best.
that's kind of where I was going. I was going to say it's partly them, but it's partly what you're given. So if you're
Yeah.
given, like a matriarch character that like is, not in much of the film at all, and like sort
Right.
of appears and reappears without the character development that you need to care.
And supposed to be a character that's so important.
Right. And it's, I have a hard time blaming her entirely for that.
Okay. I'll give
If
you that
that's
too.
the role she was handed, she did good with what she had, but it
Mhm.
wasn't,
Yeah.
they probably should have written more, or, the parts that, we saw her be more direct about the character.
Mhm.
So,
And then we had the young mage, the librarian
mhm,
mage that we mentioned.
mhm,
Again, she had her charming moments, but
mhm.
I'm trying to think of what she really brought her character brought to the story. And other than maybe the love interest for Justin Whalen's character, I'm not really seeing much for her.
Like her scene felt very rushed when they introduced
Yeah.
her. Like, they were
Yeah.
breaking in. She catches them, and it's like, okay, open this portal to get away, so the bad guys don't get the thing. And okay, we're thrown into being together because of that, and
Yep.
we're not really going to explore much more than like what your motivation is for being here.
Yep.
And she admittedly, like, puts herself through a bunch that, like, arguably she could have just walked away. She could have been
Mhm.
like, you know what? The noble thing to do is this. I'm a freaking librarian. This is out of my depth.
Right.
I'm done. You guys
Yeah.
can, figure this out and make it your problem.
Yep.
And I get it. We're watching a fantasy film, so we're already suspending disbelief.
Mhm.
But there are still certain things that, like, there's suspending disbelief, and then there's like suspending logic.
Right. That's the big thing.
Right. Like, even in the context that you're in, like, yes, okay, there's dragons and orcs and this and that, but like, is this still what somebody would do? You know?
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. And the
mm,
scene in the tavern, where
mhm.
we meet the elf warrior and with
Yeah,
the very kind of what's the word? Just very
blah.
very reminiscent of what we've seen before. I felt like it didn't
Mhm.
really it looked good, but it didn't really like it's exactly what I would expect from that troll eating all the food, just sitting there, just shoving food in his mouth, and uh,
Mhm.
the tropes were there.
Yeah, very, very much.
And oh, the elf village, that was another thing. I really liked the look of the tree. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah,
That was another nice moment. Um,
yeah. I mean,
I
I, I,
thought,
I think I think the one of the kind of the takeaways for this is, and I kind of wrote this a little bit into my review last night. I think the people that enjoy this the most are probably going to be the same people that like saw it originally and wanted more for it, but like in their heart, or still have some nostalgia for it.
right.
And and,
I
and
think I kind of
anybody,
fall in that
yeah,
category.
and anybody else, like, they're finding the little nuggets of enjoyment out of it to sort of justify the watch.
Mhm.
But it's hard, like, you know what I mean, like
It
the
is.
the glaring issues supersede the nuggets. But you find the nugget and you're like, okay, this, that,
Yeah.
I again, like, I thought that like cemetery scene was kind of interesting because
Mhm. Yep.
playing D&D, we've had characters die, and we don't talk a whole lot about like what their burial sites look like. You
Mhm.
make a new character, you move on. Sometimes, like, there's like a uh depending on if you've got characters that like that would perform like religious rites, you might have it. But that visual was cool to me because I've played the game and I'm like, oh, okay, this is a
Yeah.
detail that doesn't really exist, and it's a good way to visualize this.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
So
and then it's
nice one.
dovetailed by a scene where everybody becomes light balls with no explanation. So,
It goes from really cool to where the hell are you going now?
and then the credits hit, and I'm like,
Yep.
that's it. Okay.
Okay.
So,
We're ending it there. Okay.
mhm.
Fair
I,
enough.
I so I'll ask you this too, even though I know this isn't what we're not talking about this one. But have you watched the more recent iteration? It's
Yes.
probably like
Honor
2 years
Amongst
now.
Thieves.
Yeah,
Yes. I've really enjoyed it very much.
I
Um,
I enjoyed it also, and that one, even though it still didn't do the thing that, like, bookended it around an actual campaign,
right.
it still feels closer because they add a lot more in the way of like creatures and lore and things that you might
Mhm.
run into,
Yes.
attached to an original story, and it works. I mean,
Yep.
it works for what it's trying to do.
Yep. Yeah,
So
they because they had beholders in this one that
mhm,
didn't really do anything. They were just there floating around. Um,
mhm,
and then in the new one, I'm pretty they used them again. I'm pretty sure if I remember.
mhm,
And I
mhm.
thought they did a little more with it, which was kind of fun. But yeah, that I think that was one of the lacking things is you have all these really cool characters, and it's not like they have to be there doing these things. But I think people need to see more of that too. And maybe if the first
Right.
film had utilized that a little bit more, and maybe
Mhm,
instead of saying, "Oh, let's put all the money into the horrible dragon CGI," let's make some of these other characters like Hook Horror and
mhm,
whatever, anything, the bog beasts and all that stuff. It might have
mhm,
been more of something that would have been a little bit better. Like I think
mhm,
the the big thing with D&D is, from my understanding, is the quest. It's the journey to get to where, whatever it is you're doing. That journey is such a huge part of it. And I don't think this movie really gave us much journey. It
mhm,
was really just set piece, set piece, set piece. Here's the end. Um,
mhm,
and I feel like the newer movie did that. It gave us that journey where you could
mhm.
see these characters at these moments where they have to make decisions, and which is what the game is about, right? Instead of rolling dice, though, we're just seeing them
Yeah, and I think
decide.
another one of the things that the new one tried to do, which I mean, I haven't talked to enough D&D people about it. I mean, to see if it actually worked or not. But when you add in the like the hallmarks, like the things that people recognize, like the creatures, the settings, the this and that, I would imagine if I'd sat and I'd gone and seen it with like my D&D play group, we could be like, oh yeah, like
Mhm.
oh yeah, this reminds me of when you used that thing or when we ran into this creature.
Right,
But I imagine that it could work as a conversation starter, reigniter, that sort of thing.
right,
That way your average campaign crew can watch these films and be like, yeah, we can relate to this because it used enough things that we know about to, hook us.
right.
So,
I think that's a huge thing. Like when I watch, a movie like Transformers or something, I'm looking for some of that lore that I grew up around, or those things that
you
we
want
knew.
you want your Megatron, yeah, Megatron. No, you want your Cybertron. You want like
Right.
well-known characters.
Yeah, and they don't have to look like they did, but I want something that harkens me there. But I think that's
Right.
why I like the newer Transformers movies, the Rise of the Beast,
Mhm.
because they give me that, whereas
Mhm.
the earlier ones didn't. And
Mhm.
and I think that's why more people have embraced those. They like to see something that reminds them of what they loved about this stuff, and that's really important. And I think this movie really missed that a lot.
Mhm.
And I
I
think
agree.
if they had just added in just little bits of that here and there, I think it would have been just enough to at least, and maybe it's not going to save the movie, but at least maybe that revisit would be more for the joy of seeing those sorts of moments
Right.
that,
And at that point, you could like try to shift to being like a cult classic,
Mhm. Right.
where your thing still has a following,
Yeah.
and even if it's not a box office success, it might become a critical one.
Yeah.
And from what I could figure out looking into this one, it really didn't seem like that happened on either side. Like it just,
No.
there's not like a hidden fan base of people that are like,
Yeah, no.
like touting this film, and there's doesn't have the
It
money to back it up either. So,
it existed at that moment, and it vanished
hmm
as quickly
and
as
and
it
you,
came.
and you and I went and took a look back at that moment,
We did.
and here we are on the B side of it.
Yeah. Oh, when we came, yeah, we're coming out the other side of it. We came out the dragon's ass, I guess, in this sense. But I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I guess the question would be if you knew people that were curious about this film and they came to you and said, "Hey, what do you think?" What would you tell them about seeing it? Would you say go watch it for yourself, or you say just avoid it at all costs?
Well, I always have a hard time like 100% telling anybody no, don't watch something because I really want people to form their own opinions.
Hmm.
But I would probably like counter at first and say, okay, what is your interest in this? What is making you want to
Yeah.
watch this? And I would probably tailor my answer to that. If it's a
Mhm.
pure like LARP of I went on this like Rotten Tomatoes and I looked at like movies with like a 1%
Right.
tomato score or less, and this is and I want to watch this. I might recommend it. I might say to them, you know what, for the pure curiosity, you should
Hmm.
watch it. But
Yep.
then if I get somebody that's like, oh man, I like D&D, should I watch this D&D movie? I'd be like, I really don't think this will offer your love of D&D anything positive.
Right.
So
Yeah, if you
uh,
love it,
it,
you probably want to approach it.
it would be a tailored recommendation based on the asker.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a definitely a tough sell in any
Mm,
capacity. It's really for yeah, it's for those curious those people that are curiosity seekers that are like,
mhm.
oh, I love bad movies.
Yeah.
Definitely give it a shot. You're gonna, you're gonna definitely get something out of that. But yeah, if you're a
Mhm.
fan and you're really looking for something that's gonna elevate your interest in this property, don't do it.
No, this would I'd worry that it would take you away from it, and
Yeah.
that would be among my reasons not to send them towards it.
Yeah.
So
Fortunately, you have the newer one that is
yeah.
more in line and more, in
Yep,
sync with these
definitely.
things.
In
So
fact, this would almost make a good show. You know what I mean? And I'm sure there
yeah.
are YouTubers out there that have shown their campaigns, but like this would probably make a great like 8 to 12 episode like Netflix show with the whole like bookending thing, and
Mhm.
you could even do it as like each episode is a session.
Yes. It starts with those people playing the game, starting the campaign where they left off, and then
Right. And
ending it
then
where they're like, we're gonna stop there. We're gonna pick up the campaign next time or something. Yeah. And the next
yeah,
episode
I mean,
leads
like,
into it.
I think that would be great.
I would
And
think
I
so
don't
too.
know if Hasbro or anybody would see a monetary merit in it, but that to me seems like the natural progression of where adapting this property should go.
I would agree with that. It seems like,
Mhm.
and I think the same would be if you adapted something like Magic or something. You'd almost want to see that game.
They, Netflix has been working on a magic show for about a decade too, and the Russo brothers have been attached the whole time, and it still hasn't come out, but it still
Hmm.
hasn't been scrapped either. I'm very curious to see where
Yeah,
that's going. So,
interesting.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so if you guys watch this and you think to yourselves, um, whether or not you should watch it.
Mhm.
My first thought is, are you a D&D player, and what do you think you want in adapted D&D media? And that should help inform whether or not this film is for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
Yep.
And as always, I mean, me and Kyle talk about what we think we should do next. But if you've ever got recommendations, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, plug them in. I'd love to get some ideas kicking because I know there's a lot out there. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Well, this
all
has
right.
been another Clash of Cinema.
Yeah,
Uh, we will catch you guys in the next one.
excellent. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Keep
Have a good
watching
one.
those crazy movies.
Yes. More controversial, the better.
Yes.
Have a good one.